In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an export to Pro Tools. Let's be better editors together. There's two ways to make an export to Pro Tools. The first one is the more traditional one to use, which is called an AAF. And the second one is a newer method of exporting to Pro Tools. Avid can now actually make a Pro Tools session. But let's get the sequence ready for exporting. I have a sequence here with sound effects, some dialogue going on. The only thing that differs from my normal sequence is that I put a timecode track in top here that you can see down here. And the reason I've done this is to make sure that the sound engineer can be perfectly sure that it's in sync. The way to do this is to go into your effects. You can start typing time and it'll show up. And you just drag it down to the track that you want to use it. In this case, I took it to the top track, track 4. Let's go back to the bins. I'll make an in and out to make sure that all my files are selected. And I'm gonna select all the tracks. And next off, we can either hit right click here in Composer window, or we can actually click on the sequence that we want to export and right click. I'm just gonna select output, export to file. And then I'm gonna go into options. Just ignore what it says here. It's a preset that I already made, but we're gonna change it anyway. So I'm gonna go into options, go into AFF, and I'm gonna select use marks. These are the in and outs that are made in the sequence. And I'm gonna use selected tracks as well. I'm gonna check this one, use AAF edit protocol. And I'm gonna check this one as well, just to make sure it's gonna work in all Pro Tools versions. I'll actually say include all data in video tracks. Some sound engineers actually like to know where I made my edit. Even though I'll send them a reference file, a full video of my sequence, they still want to know where I made the cut, the actual cut, compared to where I cut the audio. So I'm gonna start off in the video section, and I'm just gonna say link to my video. I'm not actually gonna export the video files. I'm just gonna give the engineer the sound file or the reference file. I'll say render effects. Then I'm gonna go into audio details. And here I'm gonna say consolidate media, which means I'm only copying the media which is actually used in the timeline. I'm not gonna give the sound engineer the full audio clip, and instead of giving him 20 frames, which is not that much, I'm gonna give the engineer at least 200 frames so he has something to work with. Include rendered audio effects. That means all these effects I have down here with my equalizing and so forth, I'm gonna bring those along so they can hear what I've been doing in my sequence. And I'm not gonna change anything here, but I will make sure these are on, because I just want to make sure they're all going to be WAV files and they're all going to be converted to the same bit depth and sample rate. Avid Media Composer can convert it on the fly, but I just want to make sure I give the sound engineer one type of files so he doesn't have to convert it later on. Then I'm going to say yes to putting my audio into a folder, and I'm going to use the same folder as the AAF file. Hit save, or I could say save as if I know I'm going to use this again. But in this case, I'm just going to say save. Out here, I chose my external hard drive, and I'm going to make a new folder on it. And I'm just going to call this one Pro Tools AAF. So I know it's the AFF folder. Hit create and then hit save. And Avid is now consolidating all the audio files that the sound engineer is going to use to make his sound editing. Now it's all done. In my bin, it's made a new sequence that Avid has called .exported.1. We can just double click on it, and I'm just going to say delete in and out. You'll see all the audio files in the exported sequence are offline. And the reason why they're offline is because they're outside of the Avid Media Composer folder. The video is still there because I haven't consolidated any video to the audio guy. Let's go out on the drive so you can see. Let's go out on the drive so we can see what the Avid has done. Here I have my hard drive, and this is the folder that we saved. And inside this folder, it's made an AFF. It's made an Avid Media Files folder, which they probably are not going to use because it's empty. It just has the folder structure and the database file. If I was exporting the video as well, the video would live in this folder. And in the Amphi media files folder, you can see all the audio files that we've been using in this sequence. And these are the files that the sound engineer is actually going to be working on. All right, let's go back to the Media Composer. So all these files that Avid has made are called .new, and these files I'm not going to use inside my project. So just to clean up my project, I'm just going to select them all and make sure to deselect my original sequence like that. Hit backspace and I get this menu, and I'm just going to check off all the options and delete all the files that the Media Composer made in the export. Now I'm back to a clean bin with my sequence. It's selected in and out. And the last thing I need to do is to make a reference file for the sound engineer. And that's where this time code comes in handy. Right click, output, export to file. I'm actually just going to put it inside the folder we already made, Pro Tools AAF folder. Go into options. And now I'm not going to make an AFF. I'm going to make an MP4. And I'm actually going to take this one off, because if I had some audio files in my sequence that were inactive, there's probably a reason for it. I'm going to use the same raster size as my project. In compression, I'm going to pick H264. I could use the Avid codecs as well, but a lot of sound engineers prefer to use H264. Audio, these settings don't matter that much because this is just for the reference video file. I'm just going to hit save. And I'm saving it into the same folder as my other files. And this is just going to take a few minutes. It's done. We can have a look at our hard drive again. And here is my reference file with audio in it as well, just to give the person an extra chance to sync it up with all the files that we're going to ship off to the sound engineer. What I usually would do is to zip this file, and the reason why I'm compressing it is if I'm shipping it off with WeTransfer or something like that, it's just easier to handle when you have one file to ship off to them. And now it's all ready to ship off. But let's go back into the Avid Media Composer, and now we're going to talk about making a Pro Tools session. This means that we're actually going to make a session that you can open right up in Pro Tools. Just to remember, to make a Pro Tools session in Avid Media Composer, you need the Avid Media Composer Ultimate or Avid Media Composer Enterprise. If you're using a standalone Media Composer, you're not able to do the Pro Tools session. The reason to use a Pro Tools session instead of AAF is to make sure you get all my notes. In this sequence, I have some markers, I'll show you here, and I also have some clip notes. In this test, it's not much information I given to the sound engineer, but this is just a test. In my clip notes, I have one timeline note, and in my markers, I have two markers. This is just to test if the information gets through on the AAF and what goes through with the Pro Tools session. Same thing, I marked up my sequence in and out, and I'm right-clicking on my sequence in my bin. I could do this in the record window as well. Hit export to file. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that we're not putting the Pro Tools session into the same folder as we've done before. So I'm just going to go out into the root of my hard drive, make a new folder. This one I'm just going to call Pro Tools Sesh. I'm ignoring what this says and I'm heading straight into options. Inside my options, I'm going to choose Pro Tools Session. I'm going to use marks and use selected tracks. And I'm going to include all video tracks in sequence. And like I said earlier, the reason for doing this is to make sure that the sound engineer can see where I made my video edits as well as the sound edits. But I'm not going to include the video files because we already made a reference file for the AAF export, and we're going to use the same reference file for this Pro Tools session. And here it says include markers in sequence Yeah, and you could actually choose what kind of markers you want to include. I'm just going to include all markers just to make sure all the information we put into the sequence comes along. But if you've been very good at making your markers in the right tracks, you could leave the video markers off to make sure that all the information that the director has given to you doesn't tag along, except the ones that are concerning the sound engineer. But like I said, I'm going to leave video on in this case to test with the Pro Tools engineer if all the markers tag along. I'll say link because I'm not going to export video media to the Pro Tools session, and I'm going to take this one off. Hit audio. And in audio, I'm going to say consolidate, and I'm going to make sure to have at least 200 frames to work with. This one I'm going to tick off. The reason for this is that if I made a export earlier and then afterwards made a change in my sequence, and then I had to make a new export for Pro Tools session, then it would be nice to only change the difference between the first export that I made and the second one I'm making now. But in this case, I'm only making the one export, so I'm going to leave it off. And I'm choosing to convert all my files. So I'm making sure they all have the same sample rate and the same bit rate. And then I checked embed field recorder bin data in audio. The reason for checking this is to make sure if I need to relink to the original material from this file, I can actually do it. I tick this one as well, just to make Pro Tools happy. Destination drive is my media drive, and I'm just going to hit save. Make sure it points down to our Pro Tools sys. Hit save. Let's check what the Avid has made for us. In this case, it's made an PTX file, which is a Pro Tools session file. In the Avid media files folder, it should be empty, and it is, because we don't have any video files tagging along in this export. We're going to use the reference movie file. And here are all my audio files that the Pro Tools engineer is going to use. Just going to close it all up again, and I'm going to make a compressed file. Now these two exports are ready for shipping to the Pro Tools engineer. Let's go back quickly into the Avid Media Composer. It's done the same thing. It has exported all the audio files. And if I open the exported sequence and remove in and out, you can see all the audio files are offline, and these ones are all called new, which means that they are consolidated. And my media is still online here, but the difference between this timeline and the original timeline is that it has removed video track 2, 3, and 4 to make it easier for the Pro Tools to read the video track. So what the Media Composer actually has done is that it's made a mix down of all those other video files or tracks and mixed it down to one track, and then it has added all my edit points into the track or into the file. It has the same name all the way through, and this is so the sound engineer knows where I made my video edit. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe, and comment if you have any questions about this tutorial or any other tutorials, and I'll help you out. Let's be better editors together. And like the other one, I'm gonna say delete it all except my original sequence just to clean it up, and say okay, and we're back to square one.